Welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast. My name is Sara Vicente Barret, and I'm your host. I'm a corporate strategist, problem solver, social entrepreneur, writer, mom of two, and passionate for growth, at home, in business, or in our community. Now that I've restarted, I feel like I have never left a podcast. I have more and more ideas for future guests, and each time I do one of these, I really do feel like I'm in the right place. As I make space for the things I love the most in my life, the writing and podcasting are no doubt a big part of it. This year, my motto is light, and therefore I'm focused on bringing things into my life that give me light and peace, but also things that bring up my zone of genius and I can shine without fear. These podcasts no doubt bring me huge energy as I love getting deeper into knowing these amazing women and sharing with the world more about them. It's time to get on. I am super excited about our guest today. Samreen and I worked together a long time ago in our years as M&A associates, and we have been in and out of touch over the years. She's had a great career with a mix of finance and corporate, and I think you will love getting behind the scenes to get to know her better. Let me introduce you to her. Samreen is a founding team member of Moonbug Entertainment with over 17 years of experience in media and entertainment. Currently, she serves as the president of Moonbug Studio, where she is responsible for all the content produced for platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Kids, Disney, and Sky, among others. Prior to becoming president of Moonbug Studio, Samreen's founding role at Moonbug was chief financial officer, leading Moonbug's fundraising efforts as well as being responsible for acquiring Blippi and CoComelon. Prior to becoming president of Moonbug Studio, Samreen's founding role at Moonbug was chief financial officer, leading Moonbug's fundraising efforts as well as being responsible for acquiring Blippi and CoComelon. Before Moonbug, Samreen held various senior finance and operational roles at Wildbrain, Warner Media, and Morgan Stanley. It is time to come and meet Samreen. Samreen, welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sarah. Lovely to see you.
You too. And before we start talking business, let me ask you, what was your favorite thing to do as a child, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
So my earliest memory is learning the spelling of how to spell doctor. And I still remember, even now, I would go on and on, DOCTOR. I hope I got it right. I got that right. And I felt from that time I was like, oh, I want to be a doctor, and it just was fascinating to me. Which obviously, my mother was very excited to hear that I will probably become a doctor. That did not really happen. I took obviously a different path, but that is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a doctor.
That's definitely you've got a different path.
Yeah.
So you worked in finance for the early years of your career, and that's actually how we've met. How do you feel like that experience that you did have in different places contributed to how your career developed afterwards?
Partly it goes back to my, my experience, where I grew up. So I grew up in Pakistan. And, as my early years, my schooling, my education, early college education was in Pakistan. And people follow 2 or 3 different paths. One being doctor, that I wanted to be as a child, or an engineer, or a lawyer, or a banker, right? So there are 4 professions that people think if you are successful or if you're getting somewhere in life, you're probably a doctor, engineer, a lawyer, or a banker, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to be a doctor, didn't become a doctor. When I finished my degree in economics, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, I want to be a banker. And investment banking was a really was a catchphrase, because at the time there was a lot of privatization going on in Pakistan. So I ended up in investment banking, worked for an affiliate of Merrill Lynch. I thought, starting off at, in finance gave a very good grounding of and also technical. Obviously you develop your technical skills in a professional setting. Sometimes I wonder exactly what did I study versus what I'm working on. It's very different. But starting off in finance gives you that kind of training, the discipline to work and the work ethic. And I think that kind of is unparalleled. So I'm glad that I started off that way and worked for a professional organization, subsequently working with you as well in London. Obviously, there are other moves that continued, and I moved away from the investment banking advisory role, but I stayed in finance for a very long time. Yeah. So the skill set that I developed in the early years of my career has been beneficial to this day, where I have more than 15 years of work experience now. So it really shaped the kind of person that I am, how I think, and I think it all goes back to the training that you get as a finance professional.
Yeah, I think that point is highly underestimated when people are applying to finance these days, because it's not the sexiest industry. Let's face it. And recently I was in this event and people were debating in markets and this, and I was like, you can do whatever you want, but if you go to corporate finance, you end up getting a discipline and a school that it's very hard to get elsewhere. And yes, it's painful as well, but at the same time it just creates a skill set in a very condensed period of time, which I think, like you, it shaped me as well for whatever then I went to do in the future. But you brought another point which was interesting, which was you stayed in finance even when you left finance. And so when we look at your resume, you kind of made a move to the what we call kind of corporate world, to more media, but you stayed in finance in a way. So what led you to do this move, and how was that transition?
I think it goes back to me as an individual. So I think throughout my life, and when I graduated, I always worked on these like 5-year plan. What is my next 5-year plan? They're kind of lost in the way, and we'll come back to it later on. But my 5-year plan when I graduated from college was like, I'm going to finish my MBA. And then my 5-year plan from there is like, oh, I'm going to be at a bulge bracket bank and I'll be doing XYZ. So I got to my first goal of being at a bulge bracket bank. But I also realized that, it's not, it is what I thought, a sexy career in finance at a really good organization, but it is not what I was or what I am, and it is not what I want. I would also say that, the work-life balance bit. And I know it's like, maybe it's okay to say it, maybe it's not okay, but the work-life balance bit was pretty strong reason for me to rethink of what I really wanted. But as I said, like even leaving finance, I stayed in finance. So I mean, when you look at your transferable skill set, even coming out of finance, you're like, okay, what can I do? So I ended up like my first role outside of investment banking was in a corporate. I liked the media sector, so I started looking around, and there was an opportunity at Time Warner Company, Turner Broadcasting, as an internal M&A strategy role, and which is usually, when people leave from finance, that's like literally the place they go to. They end up in a corporate strategy role of some sort. So that's what I did, and I realized. Within a year, I mean, the first few months was like really sexy. Like you can browse Facebook while at work, and in the bank you can't even like, look at you can't even open. I mean, I remember my first week at work, I was like, this is fantastic. I'm doing like, work research whilst on Facebook. This is like great, fantastic. But within a year and a half, I realized that, okay, whilst I got the work-life balance bit, but I got too much of like work-life balance in the sense that it was like a very 9 to 5 culture. It was a very like stable, large corporate. I got one bit, but I missed the other bit, which is like things are not moving fast enough. I don't know exactly where I am. So remember going back to like I always have a 5-year plan, and then I'm like struggling all of a sudden. What is my 5-year plan? And I look around and I'm like, okay, I moved into this internal strategy role, which is sort of like a shoe-in for most people leaving from investment banking. But where am I going, right? Where is and I quickly realized that, Turner at the time, like I think within like a year and a half of me being there, they went through an internal restructuring. The internal M&A team was sort of like more or less disbanded. And I'm like, I said to myself that, I'm probably going to die in mid-management here. This is not the place that I want to stay. The company is not growing. It's not a fast-paced environment. People told me like, if you haven't stayed in Turner for 10 years, we don't really know who you are. People were there for like 10, 15 years, and I'm like, that's not me. So in the meantime, during that time, I also got married. So that, the priorities changed for a little bit. But soon after that, I realized that this is not what I want to do, and I left. So I consider myself as a very risk averse, and I'm sort of like going into my journey. But like you can interrupt if you want to take the conversation somewhere else. Let me know. So I consider myself as a very risk-averse individual, and it was the first time in my life where I was like completely out of my depth, out of my comfort zone, and I left. And at the time, I started exploring about what I wanted to do in life, and I knew that I did not want to be in a very large corporate because I've seen it, and I'm like, this is not me, because
Yeah.
The very large corporate has a different kind of like political mechanics, and I am not built to navigate that. So I had a long think about like, okay, what do I enjoy the most, and where am I best positioned to excel of like things that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And I started like chatting to a lot of people. And don't forget that, again, going back to my risk averse individual and cost of living in London, right? So
Yeah.
you have to like keep those things in perspective, so you don't have this indefinite time to continue to explore. It took me almost 6 months, to be honest. I mean, and I think that's probably the only career break. I mean, besides my family leave, that's the only really, which is not really a career break, to be honest.
Not really.
It's different altogether.
You're working on different skill sets.
Exactly. So that was the only career break, and my husband was very happy. He's like, "Whoa, like I'm looking at Ottolenghi books and I'm making meals every day," and I'm like, "Yeah, this got to stop."
This is
So
not gonna last that long.
yeah, exactly. So I
But
left in like
let me ask you something, which goes a little bit off track, but I think you bring a good point, because you embarked in this reflection and kind of, right, what do I want to be when I grow up, kind of thing. How did you do that? Did you do that on your own? Did you get a coach? Did you talk to people in different industries? Well, how did you go about it?
I think the latter, right? Talking to different people. So meeting up people, being open, being really open and open to myself. Like, obviously when you're talking to people, you're basically telling them you're interested, you want to learn, but being very candid with myself to say, like, I really don't know what I should be doing. So that meant I was talking to boutique banks. So even looking at investment banking at the time, I was talking to restructuring kind of consulting organizations, so more operational focused. I was talking to smaller companies like startups. And honestly, during those conversations, so when I like think back about my path, it's just like being in that moment and being open to myself and really candid, that and recognizing what's working, what wasn't working, and allowing myself that time to really work out what is it that I want to do. And I think sometimes we miss that point, which is like who you are, right? Or who what people expect from you versus who you are. And sometimes, there's so much noise around us that we forget of who we are, right? What makes us happy and what makes us uncomfortable, and what is it that we want. And I think it's very important in order to lead a happy, fulfilling life. And I mean, it keeps going back and forth, right? Whether you listen to your inner self.
Yeah, you don't always want to listen.
You don't always want to listen, because sometimes your inner self is telling you something that you don't want to hear. But and the more kind of reflection I've done, and also like in thinking about this conversation, is like when you listen to yourself, and then when you make those decisions, they lead you to something that's more fulfilling than when you listen to what people are telling you should be doing, and then going ahead and do it. That may not always work out, because you haven't really allowed yourself to think about yourself and where you are in that moment and doing that. So that, I mean, honestly, that conversation led to someone who's setting up Wildbrain. Someone introduced me randomly, a headhunter at a company said, there's this person who's setting up this entity, and it's like right up your alley in like children's media space. That led me to a conversation about Wildbrain. And by that time, I'd already left Turner like almost 6 months ago. And I said, you know what? I will give it a shot. And I said, typically in my mind, startups are not really looking for strategy people. So Wildbrain wasn't a startup. It was Wildbrain, now DHX Media, the large Canadian company, is called Wildbrain. So the Wildbrain that I'm talking about is Wildbrain Spark, which is their digital media, the YouTube AWORD business. So I ended up having the conversation with this person. He said, why don't you come and help me write a business plan? And I joined them for like 4 to 6 weeks. And my husband even at that time said that they're undervaluing you, why are you doing this? And I'm like, you know what, I can't really sit at home and make meals, so I'm going to give it a shot and I will see where it goes, right?
He was missing the Ottolenghi.
I know, he was missing the Ottolenghi. Oh my god, 20-30 ingredients in each dish. So I barely go in the kitchen these days, much to my husband's annoyance. No, I'm just joking. But I ended up staying there for almost 4 years. So I took on a role which was more like, again, finance never left me. It was finance and operational. Those skill sets always come in handy when you're making a decision, when you're looking at a growth in a company, when you're looking at numbers, when you're looking at, reporting, when you're looking at budgeting, everything you do. It's so like fine, the skill set that I had developed as a banker in my early career has helped me along the way and has helped shape decisions. I ended up staying there for like almost 4 years, and which led me to my move at Moonbug.
So that takes us to almost today, even though it was back in 2018. You joined Moonbug Studio as a CFO, and then you're the president there today. How has that path developed? Again, you started in your finance space, but clearly you've now moved into a different place. How did it develop, and how does it fit in this 5-year plan that you talk about?
Yeah, I think I need to redo
you lost track.
Yeah. So my 5-year plan, I guess, back in 2017, 2018 became like focusing on having a family.
But a pretty big plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's a separate conversation, but we had a long journey there as well. But in 2018, so part of our, the founding team of Moonbug are the people that I met at Walbrain. So there was definitely this like space in children's entertainment that we wanted to explore further, and there was an opportunity for me to join, which I basically embraced. I was pregnant at the time. It wasn't an easy time, but I think there's never an easy time. There's never an easy time for having children. There's never an all right or okay time to have children and to have focus on your career as well. You just need to, and I think at that point. So let's go back to the professional, right? So there was an opportunity for me to join as a founding CFO, and it has been a phenomenal journey because I joined in 2018 until 2021. I was the CFO. We made 10 acquisitions, had like 3 fundraising rounds, and I mean 2 of those.
You're going to tell me you had another child in the meantime?
Yes.
Exactly.
And I also had my daughter in 2021. I mean, so Moonbug is 2018, was founded in 2018. My son was born in summer 2018. So Moonbug is as old as my older child, so almost 5 years now. And yes, I had another child in 2021. So I have a son and a daughter. So my life is really full. But it tested me in ways that I've never tested myself. I probably had to put myself on the back seat, and because there was no time to have, the conversation around like, what do I need? What are my needs? But it was like, my son was 12 weeks old when I joined Moonbug full time. So it was a very difficult, you know how it is in the UK, you can take like up to a year off. It was a very difficult transition, but I just needed to, at that time, I couldn't I couldn't go down the route of like questioning myself and my judgment of what I was doing. I just needed to keep doing. And I'm very fortunate that my husband was really supportive. I wouldn't say he was happy, but he was very supportive, and he allowed me to make that call, and stood by me when I continued to like pursue my career and also having a baby, and also my mother, right? So she really helped me out when my mother took care of my son for like 3 months when until he was 6 months old. So I think you need to surround yourself with the right like infrastructure, family support system, but also in terms of professional achievement, career development, I think that was a great journey because we achieved a lot at Moonbug in those 3 years. So that again, like, led me to where I am now. So in 2022, I mean, obviously post acquisition, the role is different. The CFO role is different. So we are now acquired by a Blackstone backed company. and so the role obviously has changed, and I wanted to see what it means to take on ownership of a different kind, and I'm very fortunate that I found really amazing mentors in the CEO and the CEO of the company, and they were very keen for me to explore this role as the president of the studio, which is what it's been exactly a year since I took on that role.
You said you wanted to explore what you meant to have ownership in a different way. People don't always know what it means to kind of be steering a company or a division. Can you maybe try and describe a little bit of your day-to-day, what you spend most of your time on, and almost how you get organized across all, I'm sure, different demands that are less narrow than maybe prior roles that you have?
The role that I'm currently doing, so we own Cocomelon and Blippi. Those are the two acquisitions that we made in 2020. So we create a lot of content across all of the different platforms where our content is sitting. In most instances, we are the first content that a child is viewing in their journey, or
we've had Cocomelon in the house.
Yeah. So you know how it is, right? So we take that responsibility very, very seriously in terms of making sure that we are providing a wholesome entertainment experience. So my responsibility is overseeing all of the production and all of the creative of all the content that we create. So it's if you were in a technology company, that's the product. In terms of steering an organization, I think where this role differs is as a CFO, you're very effective because you're shepherding a company from a very I'm not trying to be doing a disservice to the CFO role, but it's a very black and white narrative, right? So numbers are going to be like this or that, and what is the narrative behind the numbers, right? But from a shepherding a company or a division perspective, the people can make or break teams, or so I think that is the biggest challenge in the move has been, because there's a huge people element. If I look at Moonbug, we're about 500 people, 250 of those are the studio team. So I run basically a division which is half the company. In terms of organizing myself across these different areas, so a lot of time goes into the day-to-day operations of what's going on. We have a huge internal team, then we work with 30 to 50 partners. Then we also have our clients, the likes of Sky, Netflix, etc. Again, my finance and operations hat doesn't leave, because those are the skill set that are needed, right? Making sure that we have the right infrastructure, we have the right processes, we are scaling up in the right way. So those are the requirements for the role. So it's different, but it still goes back to what are my KPIs and what am I looking at? A significant portion of the time goes into what is the day-to-day that we are trying to achieve. Well, what is the year-end that we want to achieve? What is a month, quarterly, and then what is a month-end, and where are we on a day-to-day perspective? You've probably heard this many times, and I'm sure you exercise that. The only way you can make sense of things and keep your focus and make sure that you're prioritizing the right thing is creating lists. I basically have a list, and sometimes I am so not overworked, but sometimes I feel so burnt out that I just start jotting them down on my iPhone, and they go from literally from Faiz has swim class tomorrow, my son has swim class tomorrow. The list is just involves everything. So it does not discriminate. It's anything and everything across small or big, from my personal life to my professional life. And then the next layer to it, that is okay, what are the priorities? Where should I be focusing my time? And what do I want to achieve, right? Because there's enough work, but there are not many hours in the day. So you need to really focus on what are the big things that you want to achieve. But besides the list, you need to make sure that you have the right enabling environment for the team to be performing their tasks, right? You don't want to get to the point where you're becoming the bottleneck. You don't want everything to roll up to you. You need to make sure that you have created the right infrastructure or the right level of autonomy that people can do their job without having to come to you. So I think that in itself is you need to create that enabling environment. You need to create the right infrastructure. You need to create the right way for people to be escalating things. It seems very reasonable or logical, but it's sometimes not there, right? So you need to continue to tell people. You need to continue to empower people. And that enabling environment, empowering people, I think that's what it entails. And not losing your eyes off the mark, right? Which is what are the costs, that you can incur? What is the revenue that you're looking at? So you need to keep all of that in check as well.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a lot of different elements into it, which is why I wanted to ask the question, because I think, sometimes people think it's just one thing or the other. And one of the biggest challenges that I've brought quite a few women into the podcast that are in leadership positions is how do you make sure the day-to-day happens, but also that then you can step up and step back, kind of have a bit of a view, where am I heading? Am I on track? And to the longer picture, to, Moonbug's 5-year plan rather than your own. And I guess you said you do the list and you do the prioritization. And I wonder if you have any tips, or, do you sit down with yourself sometimes to try and work on the business rather than in the business? Or how does it work? How do you try and make sure that you don't spend 3 months on the operational and then realize, actually, I haven't stopped to think about for a while?
I mean, 5 months is a long time in Moonbug's history, given that it's only a 5-year-old company. So for me, the focus is usually the next 18 to 24 months. There's always this risk of losing yourself in the day-to-day, missing the big picture. But the best way to tackle that is taking the time and thinking and setting deadlines, right? If I have to action something which is going to impact next year, what is it that I need answers for, and what is the timeline that I need answers in, right? Yes, day-to-day task list, yes, priorities, but then yes, what is the year calendar looks like, and what are the key events or key milestones that you need to target, so that you're also staying on track and making sure that your organization is set up that everyone's aware. So I think taking the time to think about what are the strategic objectives for your team, but even more importantly, to make sure that everyone, the management team, is aligned with your strategic objectives. You're not doing that in a vacuum. As an organization, you need to make sure that where are you having impact, which you're having impact in across different parts of the organization. So you need to be completely aligned with, whoever's leading the company, so the CEO, the COO, or the board, whoever that may be. You need to make sure that they're aligned with what you're, and they're completely, lockstep with you in terms of what you're trying to achieve. You're setting up your team in a manner that they're also communication. I think that the second key is like any, in the business versus on the business, anything that you do, you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
You need to have the right team to be helping you achieve that objective. And that means are you communicating? Are people aware that this is what you're trying to achieve, and they are behind you in that, because they're going to help you achieve that objective. So communication becomes key. And the third bit is, which is like making sure that you're following a calendar. So you're not running the risk of like, the week is morphing into months and 2 years, and you're not trying to achieve that objective.
None of them is a silver bullet, but all of them need to be in place for you to be able to move through it. Maybe we step back from the day-to-day and take a moment to reflect. When you look at the different stages of your career, is there a common line that you see to the way you work?
I am quite direct, and I am quite organized, or try to be organized. I'm probably like, I'm sure there are people who are more organized than me, but I try to be organized. I mean, you can't never be very organized. So there's always room for improvement. I would try to answer it a bit differently. I would say that, if throughout my career, and I described like how the moves that I've taken, I think one driving force has always been, since I left that like hat of like, I need to be an investment banker and I'm going to become an MD and I'm going to follow that path, which was a very rigid path, right? In a manner of speaking, like three years. Since I have left that hat, figuring out what your path would be. But when you're figuring out your path, you can't really map it out in a very linear manner.
Yeah.
Life has taken a lot of turns. But if you drew a regression line through it, you will say that, okay, fine, it's going in the right direction. It has a positive correlation. But staying nimble and flexible and going out of your comfort zone, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but going out of your comfort zone to try different things, I think that has been the driving force. So it is okay to explore different nooks and crannies. But if you're going down the wrong rabbit hole, try to come out of that quick enough so that you go back on your, so there will be a lot of like movements, but you're back on your path. I would say if I were to sum it up, it would say that, the common theme and, the way I work is like, try to keep a sense of like where you're trying to get to. But at the same time, don't be afraid to explore different routes to get there.
I think that does answer the question. And at the same time, I asked the common thread, what do you feel like it was radically different between the early stages of your career? And maybe you've given part of the answer where everything was more linear, and the recent stages, and how would you look at kind of the stark differences, and how you are in a probably better end place, and one that it fits you better?
I mean, I feel like obviously I was very naive 15 years ago. Maybe I could have been more strategic. So that's that I would say that I probably know myself better now. When as you age, as you have more experience, you can probably, I don't know, I wouldn't say better, I don't know, but different choices. So it's very easy to look back and say, well, I could have done that. I shouldn't have gone, I think people were just like beginning to work in like tech companies and at the time, and then it became such a big thing, and working for big tech.
The big difference that you're telling me is that actually the fact that you know yourself better just allows you to make different choices, right? And so that influences a lot of the path along the way.
Exactly. I mean, you could have chosen a different path, but maybe you could have come to the same realization, or you could have, ended up on the same path, but a different route. But it's very hard to say that. But going back to that, I don't think I regret my starting position, because I think it gave me the tools to be successful in my later career. Yeah. So I think it's important to remember that, you could have done things differently, but have you done things badly or not?
Yeah,
it's different, not better, right?
So you seem to have a huge amount of self-awareness. So I think the next question will be easy for you. What are the characteristics that define you as a leader?
Don't be afraid to be not liked. So I think as a leader, I think one thing that I often say to my peers here as well, as a leader, you can't always be liked, because you need to make difficult decisions, which are not going to be difficult, but they're not going to be popular decisions. I mean, a lot of people tell me that they're like, I don't set out to be intimidating, but they are intimidated, or I don't set out to be scary, but people are scared. Maybe because I'm direct. But at the same time, I said, I'm not setting out to be a popular. It's not a popularity contest. We are, at the end of the day, we're running a business. We need to make sure that we're making the right choices for the business, and sometimes those choices are not popular choices. What you need to make sure is, like, you're making the right choices, but are you making the right choices with empathy and kindness?
Yeah.
So you can be direct, but that does not mean that you can't be empathetic or you can't be kind. And that has been a significant learning curve for me, from like moving from finance into this role, because finance was like very binary, black and white. You're managing more upwards, but in here you're managing both sides, and there's a big people element to it, and a big people element, and the driving factor for people is like they want to work for an organization which is a kind organization where people are valued, right? Because
Yeah.
so I think for me, everyone has their own characteristics. I don't think there is one characteristics that define a leader. You just need to find how you can be effective. But being effective, you don't have to be cutthroat. You need to make sure that you're being effective, but you're being fair, and you're being kind, and you're being empathetic.
I think that leads us to the more behind the curtains, or behind the business aspect, where I'm always interested to show that side, because people are a bit binary sometimes, and they think of one or the other, and in fact, and you've alluded to this already, both sides of the career and the personal need to coexist in some shape or form. And so in that sense, I would ask, what does a good day look like for you?
Good day when there are no meetings, no joking. A good day looks like when nobody's running to me and saying that this is, because half my team is in LA. Nobody's coming running to me first thing in the morning. This is what we received overnight from LA. What should we do about it? I think a good day is when people don't come and tell me that there's a fire burning somewhere.
You might not have that many of those.
No.
And so what helps you, in business and at home, I guess, keep a positive attitude? Do you have any tips to share?
No, my son complains that I scream too much, so clearly not doing a good job there. um, I I think so. I'm going through a little bit of like self-reflection these days because my son is almost 5 and my daughter is 2 years old. I mean, right now the physical need is like immense, right? So there are no holidays, there are trips with family, if you know what I mean. Which obviously, like, I complain to my husband about that as well. But then I am going through this moment where I feel like, that physical need will quickly go away. And before I know it, they will stop needing us the same way. I'm sure there's always going to be, everyone tells me there's always going to be a need. But the way I keep a positive in my household, the way I keep a positive attitude is like always like checking myself, not being unhappy that I have to wake up super early, even on the weekend, to make breakfast, thinking that, before I know it, these days will pass very quickly. I mean, I'm human, right? So sometimes I forget that bad part and I want to have a lie-in. That doesn't happen. I want to value the moments with my family, right? So if I'm pursuing, I'm quite ambitious. If I'm pursuing a career and I also want to have a fulfilling family life, I can't have both, right? One thing, if I'm here, I'm not there. So I need to like keep a check of like, okay, what is it me as an individual? What would make me happy and fulfilled in any given day? And am I doing, at least half the things that would make me happy and fulfilled? And a lot of it is like, demands on your time, demands at work and demands at home. And the demands at home is, I'm saying that it's, it's a diminishing curve. Like soon those physical demands will go away and then I will probably miss the time. So I probably are going on this like trajectory of like, I'm not going to have another child. So, my children are like growing up very fast and then in a couple of years they will be quite independent. So I have a very short amount of time where I'm needed. So let's make the most of it. It's very important, how do they say it, to have the glass half full, like to make sure like, I'm fulfilling my soul in a manner of speaking. If that means, right, having a coffee chat with a friend. So I need to make sure that I'm making time to do that because that will make me a better manager and a better mom because I've done something for myself, right? It's like, maybe just, staying up an hour late and then watching an episode of Succession, or maybe, you need to, I think you just need to. So I'm reading this book, How to Measure Your Life, these days. I've probably gone through like, 10 pages into it, but I sort of am getting the gist, right? So basically, I just need to create a pie chart of my life of where I am. And then figure out like, how I want to carve out the time of like different things to do. And honestly, also making time for my spouse. So I think I'm probably guilty of not, because everyone else is like very vocal about their needs, the children and workplace. But he's probably the one who gets marginalized the most.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground in there, but I think one of the things that come to mind there's quite a few things that come to mind as you speak, and it's interesting because I've been on that journey too, and I've written quite a lot about it in the blog, and I think your positive attitude is very linked to gratitude and to just kind of, yes, I'm waking up, God knows when to make you breakfast on a Saturday, but now when the kids go down, we have to like until 9 o'clock. You're not allowed to knock on my door on a Saturday. And if they don't, I'm almost like, oh, they didn't. They actually went and played on their own. And so and I'm awake anyway, because I can hear every step that they take. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe it would be nice to be pulled out of bed to go play with them. And so I think, the gratitude really helps you make sure that in the moments that you are there. And then I guess your other point that reminded me of was, and I've read this book recently called Power Moms, and they talk about the concept of work-life flow. There's no work-life balance, and there's no having it all, but you do have this work-life flow where, some days you will lean more to one side and other days to other. And the concept really resonated because it kind of helps you frame it, a little bit better. So I know we're stretching our conversation, and I think we feel like we could be here for a long time. But maybe I'll ask you, what advice would you give to the Samreen that I met, 15 years ago? in the early stages of her career.
It's easier to say like 15 years on what you could have done better, like, or different, not if not better, but different. I think there is a lot of there is a lot of value to be had in, like, taking a beat, taking a moment, and really, like, listening to your instincts. And I feel like the older we get, the less we listen to ourselves, our inner selves, that basically that the power that comes from within, or the fulfillment that comes from within, no amount of, like, hygiene factors or anything would give you that. So definitely try to know yourself better. Have a think about, like, what is it that really makes us happy and fulfilled in our lives. I think I came to it very late, but the realization that I've had is, like, whenever I have been very, very happy or fulfilled or successful, whatever measure of success you may look at, it's been, it's in the periphery, or in that, I have had, like, really good mentors, like people I could talk to, people I could brainstorm with, and people I could, who could give me advice, sound advice. So finding that tribe, even like within the organization, outside of the organization, or finding that, like, group of people that really understand you, have the experience, and can push you, when you're afraid to push yourself, and get you out of that comfort zone, and being that soundboard. I think that's really, 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 really critical. And it basically defines or determines what you get out of, where you are in life. It could be, like, life advice. It could be work advice. Mentor doesn't mean that someone who's just giving you career advice. It could be everything.
Yeah.
And the last bit I'm gonna add is, like, I've been very fortunate to be on a startup journey, and have had 2 children in the process, and it's only because I have had really, 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 really supportive bosses, and I don't think everyone gets that luxury. And I feel like I'm in a privileged position, and I feel like I need to pass that on, right? So that privilege to other people who are working in my organization. It's very, very tough. So having that lens as a manager, and then as a working mom, I think it's important to keep that. But I would say, like, 15 years ago, I would probably tell myself that it's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not be on that linear path. It's okay to take a different path, and it will all work out as long as you persevere, you work hard, and you listen to yourself.
That sounds like a great finish. I just wanted to ask you 3 fire round questions. Do you have a favorite book that you want to share?
The Alchemist. I think I am not a big reader. That's probably the only book I've read like 2 or 3 times in my life, and I've read it most recently. And every time I've read it, I have taken a different message from it.
Yeah, I haven't read it in a while. Maybe I'm going to add that back into my summer list. And do you have a favorite quote?
Fail fast.
That's a good one. And I don't know if you do one or if you would think of one. What would be your word of the year for 2023?
Soul searching.
All right. That sounds like a great finish then. Thank you so much for being at the Make Space for Growth podcast. It's been delightful to have you here. I'm sad that we can't go on for hours and hours. We probably would not get tired of talking. And I appreciate your time, and very grateful that you joined us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. Lovely to speak to you. Bye-bye.
I have so much enjoyed my conversation with Samreen today. We had not seen or spoken to each other in years, and it was such a great and profound way to catch up. I really appreciated how Samreen's openness and authenticity as she shared the different life choices she had to make, and how she navigated and sometimes dropped her 5-year plans. I resonate with her struggles of ensuring how do you make the most of your day and of your time and seek to be grateful for what we have. So gratitude is something that I've been practicing and preaching for a few years, and I feel like it has really shaped me and my vision of the world. I'm very excited to see how Samreen continues to develop her path, especially as she is in this journey of self-reflection and as she seeks to achieve a flow between all of the different things that make her happy. What were your favorite parts? I'm always happy to hear. For now, I'm grateful that you're on the other side, and thank you for listening to the podcast. If you ever wanted to give it a review, I would appreciate the gesture, as it brings the story of Samreen and all the other amazing women that have been here further to more people. This podcast has been produced by Alice Stansfield. It is time to go now. This is Sarah Vicente Paget, and I get to do this.